Hello and welcome to part 6, a continued discussion on the CSS box model. Now, in the previous part 5, we added border, padding, margin, and width to H1. And if we just go and take a look at our layout here, I should also mention in part 5, I referenced H1 as H2 towards the end of the video. Sorry, my bad. So we are dealing with the H1. Now with the box model, what we're doing is our margin is this space outside of the border. And then of course we have a border, we've called out as 1 pixel. And then inside we have padding, okay? And I believe we called out 20 pixels on the padding all the way around. Now this element, this H1, is 500 pixels wide. So if we go back, in fact, we have a width of 500 pixels. And we have padding. Now this padding goes all the way around. So the padding on the left and the right will be added to the width. And this 1 pixel of border on the left and the right will be added to the 500. So H1 is not really 500. H1 is 542 pixels wide. Okay, that is the traditional box model. So if we go to W3 Schools, you'll see that basically the box model is a box that wraps around every HTML element. And this element consists of the margins, border, padding, and the actual content. Okay, so you have whatever the width of your content, whatever padding, whatever width of border, and whatever margin you add is all calculated for a total width. Okay, so that's sort of the older traditional way of dealing with the box model. And if you don't understand the box model, then it becomes a bit more difficult to understand how elements are pushing themselves around, or elements are pushing away from other elements. And that spacing can, well, it can be kind of difficult to figure out what's going on unless you are in your notes or in your mind actually calculating, again, the width of the content, the padding, the border, and the margin. Okay, well, there's an advanced way of dealing with this, which makes everything a lot easier. So again, at W3 Schools, if we go to CSS box sizing, we're going to see an example right up here. Okay, so this example basically is a div, a generic division of space block level element, that is going to be set or is set to 300 pixels wide. And you'll see there's a border. Okay. Now this div is also 300 pixels wide. And the height is being set to 100 pixels. But there's padding added to this element. So if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see the code example. So div 1, the first one, has a width of 300, a height of 100, and a border of 1 pixel. Div 2 has a width of 300, a height of 100, but there's 50 pixels of padding added. So what we are seeing is a div 2, a second div, which appears physically larger. And that's because in the CSS box model, we have to add the content, the padding, the border, and the margin. All right, so this is a really nice, and I've mentioned this before, but this is a really nice feature in W3 Schools. Let's go ahead and try it for yourself. Okay, so let's just, all right. I can scroll this down a little bit. So we're going to see our code, div 1, div 2, our style, and then we're going to see our 2 divs in the body of the document. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy what is div number 2. And I should point out here that this is a div element, but we're using a class. div2 to target a particular rule, okay, which we haven't written yet, but we will. All right, so I'm going to copy this, or I should say div2 does target this class. We're going to change the class and create a new one. All right, so let's go ahead and paste. And I'm going to change div2 to div3 for our example. And then I'm just going to copy the entire rule for div2. So we'll copy, and we will paste, and we'll call this div3. So now we're using the class div3 for our selector. So this div will use this attribute value, class, and div3 is the value, to link or hook to this selector. So if we run our code, we will see a duplicate of div number 2. Okay, so again, this is the traditional approach of the CSS box model, where the content, the padding, the border, and the margin are all added up to get a new total width or height. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use what is called box sizing. So here on div3, I'm just going to drop down and space over, and we're going to add the property box sizing colon, and our property value is border box semicolon. So what's going to happen is, now that we're using this new advanced property, the border, actually it'll be this one here, the border and the width should match this blue one up here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run. All right, so you'll now see that div3 here, our class div3, is actually 300 pixels wide, just like the class div1. And if we look, we'll see our padding is 50 pixels. Here's 50 pixels, here's 50 pixels, and here are 50 pixels. But the bottom is a bit of a problem. Or maybe it's not. It depends on what your end result is, what you're looking for. But in this case, if I wanted 50 pixels to show up on the bottom, then we have to remove this absolute value of 100 pixels for the height. And we can do this by typing in auto. So the height will now automatically adjust based on the content, based on the padding, okay, even as far as the border and the margin, okay, if we were to add margin. So let's go ahead and run, and you will now see the result. So this is the example of the traditional box model, where everything is calculated and whatever width we've called out is increased by whatever padding, border, and content. The new advanced box sizing basically does the calculations for us, and we will continue to get our called out original width, and we don't have to then compensate otherwise for how other elements are affected around our element using box sizing. All right, so hopefully that covers or gives you a better understanding of working with the CSS box model, and also an advanced approach to the box model using box sizing, property, and border box value. And again, always check out W3 Schools, and keep in mind that when you're studying the concepts, you have the option to try it yourself, where you can make modifications to the code and see what happens real time, which can be very, very helpful.